Thank you for those great presentations. If you haven't had a chance to submit your questions, please enter your questions into the Q&A pod so that we may answer as many questions as time allows. And joining us on the Q&A panel is Dr. Derek Smith, who joined FDA in 2010 and served as a compliance officer, CMC assessor, quality assessment lead, branch chief, and division director prior to his current role. Derek is the Associate Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment within OPQ. Our first question is for Dr. Ramanadham. And here's the question. If my application includes facilities that cannot be inspected because of travel restrictions, will my application automatically receive a complete response?
Thank you, Ray. So in response to that question, the answer is no. Applications will not automatically receive a complete response due to travel restrictions. We had mentioned in our Q&A that I put the link on for our presentation, as well as during the presentation itself, that we're utilizing all available tools to us, records in lieu of an inspection, working with our trusted partners from other regulatory agencies, and with applicants about any information we can get about a facility to make decisions about the need for a PAI and our ability to take action on applications in lieu of inspections that might otherwise be needed. There are situations where we may still determine that those tools may not be sufficient for our needs and an inspection will be needed. And in such cases, we'll be working with the applicant to let them know about the potential impact and any mitigation activities that we can pursue afterwards. In some situations, that might lead to a complete response action. In other cases, it may mean deferring action on the application until such time as an inspection can be completed. But suffice to say that the inability to do inspections due to travel restrictions does not automatically mean we will complete response on application.
Thank you for that great answer. And we do have another question for Dr. Ramanadham. If my application includes facilities that cannot be inspected because of travel restrictions, will I be informed of this by the agency? Will I be allowed to switch out the site if that was the only deficiency holding up the application approval?
Thank you, Ray. Yes, so our intention is to work with applicants and let them know when we run into situations where an inspection is needed and we think there might be an inability to conduct that inspection, to inform the applicant as soon as possible during the review cycle so that we can discuss potential impact of the application as well as any possibility for modification to the application without significantly impacting or altering the review of the application. Important to note for that last little bit of the question there that changing facilities during the review is certainly the decision of the applicant. It's nothing that the FDA can take ownership of or recommend, but we can certainly discuss the impact of doing such a thing to the application and the review timeline, but it's certainly an option for the applicant to consider.
Thank you for that great response. Our next question is directed to Dr. Qiu. Due to current travel restrictions, do I still have to submit production schedules in my BLA?
The facility must be in production. That's a regulatory requirement. The agency will assess the application to determine if inspection is needed. But if it's a medical necessary drug, we will still try our best to conduct the inspections. If we will not be able to conduct on-site inspection, we will be able to use other alternate approaches to try to determine if we can mitigate the on-site inspection using other approaches, for example, like 704 document reviews. But in order to meet the regulatory requirement for BLA submission, the production schedule must be included in the BLA before we can file the BLA.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question goes again to Dr. Ramanadham. My site is currently under OAI. When will FDA resume inspections so we may resolve the issues noted in the warning letter? Given the current travel restrictions, is an inspection required to resolve my OAI status?
Thank you, Ray. I think we can answer part of that question. And the reason I say that is, of course, we represent the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, our mission being pre-approval assessment. We don't directly opine or get involved in the re-inspection of facilities when it comes to warning letters. That's more of the Office of Compliance in conjunction with the Office of Regulatory Affairs. However, what we can talk about is what does the world look like for resuming inspections? As we mentioned in the presentation, we are still prioritizing mission-critical inspections and conducting them where feasible, meaning not only do we think it's an important inspection, but can we get investigators to the site, and is it safe for all participants to actually execute that inspection? And that's the same approach whether it's a pre-approval inspection, a for-cause follow-up inspection, or a high-priority surveillance inspection. When it comes to resumption, the FDA is closely monitoring the global situation and the dynamic changes in global situation regarding COVID-19 and cases to look at areas where we are able to resume inspections and do so in a safe manner. So a lot of the resumption depends on how things develop when it comes to the pandemic and subsiding as far as cases and infection and just the nature of the pandemic itself.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Shah. What will be the time frame for KASA implementation?
Thank you for that question. So KASA, we have already piloted it for solid oral dosage forms, and it is going to be implemented in about January, February next year for solid oral dosage form, and right now it is going to be implemented only for ANDAs. However, I wanted to remind everyone that we have already started using risk-based assessment approaches for all dosage forms. So KASA is a framework where we are using computer-aided assessment so that we can automate and can gather a lot of information on manufacturing processes and facilities across applications. But it is going to be used mainly for solid oral dosage forms in that structured assessment format. Very soon it will be followed by liquids and some other products. So stay tuned.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Shah. If the site is classified as OAI but not under import alert, why are the approval of the applications put on hold? We want to understand the risk of approving, which makes FDA take the policy decisions not to approve. And then it has a dash with OAI.
Okay, thanks again for that question. So I think it's very important to understand OAI is out of compliance. So for any site to be approved for pre-approvals at a pre-approval stage, we need all the sites to be under compliance. only import alert doesn't make it more risky. OAI also makes it risky site, and we cannot have any approval coming from OAI site. So that's why the applications will be put on hold because they are deemed as out of compliance. Even though for pre-approval and inspections, we do not cover as 6 objectives under surveillance inspection. However, we need to cover the site as CGMP compliant, and if they are not compliant, we cannot really approve the products.
Thank you for that response. The next question is again for Dr. Shah. What is IQA?
So IQA stands for Integrated Quality Assessment, in which we have used team-based expertise. We do assessment for drug substance, drug product in different sub-offices of OPQ. In OPMA, we are responsible for conducting assessment on manufacturing processes and facilities. So IQA for OPQ stands for Integrated Quality Assessment.
Thank you for that response. Our next question again is for Dr. Shah. Is the API inspection procedure the same as listed for the finished formulation?
So in principle, they are same. However, we do not have any compliance program for API. We use ICH Q7 principles for API inspections. In general principles, it's very similar. We use risk-based approach, first of all, for any pre-approval inspection. And it is very similar to finished formulation that we need to be compliant. And have 3 objectives covered, but we use ICH Q7 specifically for API inspection.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Smith. When FDA is planning to resume international inspections, they're asking when are they planning to resume, and how are you planning to approve applications if a facility is not inspected by FDA until today? Hello, we're going to move on to the next question. We may be having some technical difficulties. The next question will be for Dr. Qiu. What is the difference between biologics and biosimilars?
So, a biosimilar is a biological product. So the only thing is biosimilar is just highly similar to a reference biological product. So that's the only difference. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. We'll go back to Dr. Smith, and I'll reread the question. When is FDA planning to resume international inspections? And how are you planning to approve applications if the facility is not inspected by FDA?
Thanks, Ray. I apologize for the technical difficulties. So as Mahesh had noted earlier, with respect to resuming foreign inspections, the agency is currently looking at the travel advisories that exist. And right now the travel advisories are level 4, which which make it very difficult to proceed with foreign inspections. But the agency is taking into account the travel advisories, the current pandemic situations, and focusing on also the health and safety of both the FDA inspectors as well as the staff at the facilities to not further risk any of the health and safety there as we begin to proceed with foreign inspections in the future. With respect to a facility that has never had an FDA inspection history, as Mahesh noted in the presentation, we're looking at all available information that we may be able to use to assess that facility without an inspection. As we proceed during our assessment, if at any time we feel that an inspection is needed rather than using other methods, we'll inform the applicants.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Smith. Can a new site inspection through FDA occur by remote audit if possible during the upcoming months?
So currently, as Patrizia noted in her opening talk, virtual inspections are actually not under consideration at this time based on the regulatory language that govern inspections. So inspections are generally considered on-site activities observing the manufacturing operations in the facility. So at present time, virtual inspections are not being considered. However, we do continue to use all available tools to remotely assess whether we can find the facility adequate for the listed operations in the application without the need for an inspection on-site.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Shah. What are the failure modes being assessed generally during quantitative risk assessment, and in parentheses FMEA, done by OPMA for assessment of any manufacturing firm for inspection requirements?
So thanks for that question. So FMEA, we are using that quantitative risk assessment model to make decisions on the manufacturing assessment. We are not utilizing quantitative risk assessment for pre-approval inspection decisions, but we are utilizing all the available information to us, which is more on qualitative basis. So we use that history of the site, whether that site has produced any product for the same profile code. If not, then we may recommend an inspection. Also, we are using the risk-based approaches. For example, if we deem that manufacturing process is extremely complex, or we do not have sufficient confidence in capability of manufacturing site, or there are scale-up questions which are not answered even though we have sent the information request. We are not satisfied, or we sometimes see some other issues coming from other disciplines, then we recommend inspection. So we have not started using any quantitative tool to answer it briefly. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Smith. Is there any provision at FDA to waive off inspections based on EU inspection outcome?
Thanks, Ray. So first, I'd like to clarify. So the EU inspection outcomes are generally assessed through the mutual reliance agreement, and so for the agency, the mutual reliance has been we've determined that the EU inspectorates are capable from a surveillance inspection to replace or mimic the FDA surveillance inspections. However, that determination has not been made for pre-approval inspections. With that said, we do continue to use information from our foreign regulatory authorities, including those that have been found capable under the MRA, and we use that information to determine whether an inspection would be needed as a part of our pre-approval inspection assessment process.
Thank you for that response. Our next question is for Dr. Ramanadham. Can 704A4 be used in lieu of on-site inspection for first sterile product from site if this falls in NCE 1 category and hence is time critical?
Thank you, Ray. So as discussed during the presentation, the ability to utilize 704A4 really depends on whether the records that we think we can receive are going to be able to satisfy our inspection requirements, rather the risks that are driving the inspection. So in general, for a site that really that has no inspection history, the records probably won't get us the answers we're looking for, especially if we need to observe operations with our own eyes. So for example, aseptic manufacturing operations that have never been observed before present a real big challenge when it comes to records, since investigators really need to look at the facilities, the operators, their movement in the facility and in the sterile core, their interventions, etc., where paper records really don't give you that picture. However, the utilization of the records really depend on the type of operation we're talking about, the facility that we're talking about, its history from an inspection standpoint, and then that niche area in between all of that as far as the specific questions that we have about that facility and whether or not paper records can give us an adequate picture. So put all that together to say it really depends on the scenarios and the situations that we're looking at to determine whether 704 can be used.
Thank you for that response. Our next question, our group of questions, is for Dr. Shah. What is the definition of inadequate OOS investigation? How do we assess the OOS investigation if we did not get any root cause and replicate testing results that were met in the acceptance criteria? And what should be the assessment components?
I think this is really interesting question. So out of specification, investigation need to have root cause identified, but as I understand, the question relates to if there is no root cause identified and if the replicate testing results are meeting the acceptance criteria, will we call it inadequate OOS investigation? So if you do not see any trend, for example, if it is just one off result that you have obtained and you retested the sample, and if you cannot pinpoint to any root cause, we are not really going behind only one abnormal result. But if we see a pattern that you have a lot of OOSs and then the retesting resolves the issue, that's when we get suspicious. So that's when we determine that this is inadequate OOS investigation and firm doesn't have a good understanding of the issue or the problem that is causing this OOS. So if we also look at patterns, and I'm sure that industry must be looking at the trends and patterns, and they need to do everything possible to identify. So now if we just talk about a single instance of OOS result, and if that's a major root cause can be identified based on that and can be prevented, that is the best for the industry, that you do not see that abnormality coming out in the future batches, right? So it's into your interest to do adequate investigation and prevent future batches being out of specification. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. The next question is for Dr. Qiu. Due to travel restrictions, would you consider virtual inspections when pre-license inspection is deemed necessary?
And this is Peter again. And when we look at the applications, we took a holistic approach to assess the the application and the site compliance history, and then we'll determine that whether we can use an alternative approach in lieu of on-site pre-license pre-approval inspection. However, if we have determined that on-site inspection, on-site pre-license or pre-approval inspection is required, we will have to conduct the inspection. And at this time, we will not consider a virtual inspection if the inspection can be used in lieu of on-site inspection. Thanks.
Thank you for that response. The next question is for Dr. Qiu again. Is process validation mandatory for biological product submissions?
Peter again, and in general, like I said in the presentation, the completion of the stage 2B process validation is required, and the data must be submitted in the application. That's a regulatory requirement. However, that we do have some flexibility in terms of the number of PPQ batches required in the BLA. That's for some certain product, for example, breakthrough drugs or orphan drugs that oftentimes they don't need that many batches. So we do have some flexibility in terms of the number of batches required in the application. So I would say if you have a plan, you want to propose an alternative approach for process validation and what number of batch, what data should be submitted in the application, I strongly recommend you to contact FDA, and you have requested a pre-BLA meeting or meeting with the agency so we can discuss your approach to process validation before you submit the application. So we can come up with agreement based on the type of a product and what you propose in the application. Thanks.
And that was our last question for the Q&A panel. We want to thank our Q&A panel for answering the questions that came in. We'll now enter into our first break. We'll begin our next session in 10 minutes.